Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you all for coming tonight to our second week of living out God's call to justice. I'm Martha Henderson. I'm currently heading the racial justice team, and I'm glad to see each and every one of you here tonight. I'm just going to real quickly recap what we're going to talk about the agenda for tonight. So basically, I'm going to do a very brief recap of what was talked about last week, which was week one, kickoff week. Then we're going to get a little more in depth about what our three justice groups do, what kind of activities and events we're involved in, what some of the work that's already been done, and where are we hoping to go in the future. We have a short video by Carter Baldwin, our head of the youth ministries, to talk about youth involvement in justice work. And then we're going to break out into some group discussions, and we have some guided questions for you all. And this week, unlike last week, so last week we just sort of broke up into discussion groups amongst the people we were sitting near. This week we're going to ask people to actually go to a group that will have a representative from each of the justice teams that you might be interested in. This is not a commitment to join that particular team. And we recognize that some people may not know yet what they're interested in, or they may be interested in more than, these are not exclusive teams. People are more than welcome to serve on more than one, but just for the purposes of this evening, we would ask that you basically choose one of those groups just for the purposes of the discussion time. So let me just open us in prayer. Lord Jesus, thank you for this evening. Thank you for each person here. And we just dedicate this evening to you and to the work that comes from your heart. We ask you to lead us and guide us in our discussions and our work to bring forth your just world. In Christ's name I pray, amen. So let's see. So just a brief recap of last week. Both Juanita Ryan, who's also with us tonight, there she is, and Pastor Jessica, talked a little bit about what do we mean by justice. What are those? It's a big term, and couple of the points that were brought out was the distinction between retribution and restorative justice. So often in the common usage of justice, people often think of the idea of punishment or righting wrongs, that type of thing. But then the distinction was made that generally in Scripture, justice is used as restoration or healing. The idea of making things right and a way that God's love is acted out in the world. Juanita gave us the view of kind of the Old Testament perspective. There was a number of scriptures read, and the idea, an example is from Isaiah 58, where there's the scripture about breaking the chains of injustice. Then Jessica led us a bit and talked on Jesus and social justice, and basically made the point that Jesus builds on these Old Testament foundations, and it really was the way of Jesus. His life was an expression of God's love and justice and God's call to justice. And she talked about 5 ways in which that was demonstrated: spiritually, interpersonally, dialogically, meaning interacting and dialoguing with people on the topic, demonstratively, and then also sacrificially. And then following Jessica and Juanita, Mary Straight gave us her personal story about moving from kind of a conceptual idea of growing up in a church where justice was not particularly emphasized, and then coming to be led by God to get involved more deeply and personally in justice work. And in that journey, Mary talked about how she really began to see the Bible in a different way. And as she read the Bible, eyes were open to how the thread of justice, the theme of justice, runs throughout the whole Bible. Then we did what we're going to do tonight. We broke out and we did a brief introduction of the justice groups at CPC. We're going to get a little more in depth with that tonight. And then we broke out into some discussion groups and wrapped up with some question and answer. So next up, Angie and Mary will talk about Refuge.
Hi, everyone. I am Angie Dickens. I am co-leader of Refuge, along with Mary Straight. And other members of our leadership team are here. We have Eugenia Brown, Sarah Lubbers, and Juanita Ryan back there. And we've been around for about 6 years. So I think we're actually the first of these 3 groups to really form. And we being the first group, we kind of started working on like everything. And then gradually realized that wasn't really possible to sustain that, so we've kind of narrowed down to really 2 main focus areas, which are immigration justice and voter justice, and then also a lot of work on self-care, which we'll hear more about later. And the motivation we have, I think, is another motivation I think the racial justice team mentions, and I think all of us can draw on this, but we try to live out the call to justice from God in Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God, which is very different than what we see happening in much of the world today, where we see dehumanization and targeting of vulnerable people, normalization of violence and hate speech, undermining democratic institutions. I'm sure you all, you see this. So it's sort of, we're motivated by that mismatch of the feeling of the world we're called to. I mean, I always think, whenever we say the Lord's Prayer, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's not what's happening. And so wanting to make that so. And the way we do it, it's cut off a little bit here, but we kind of we do our work in 3 main ways: through education, through building relationships, and then through action. And so education, we do a lot of, we'll see some examples in our particular areas later, but we do book readings, we do bring speakers in, we do things that educate ourselves and educate the congregation about different issues. Do a lot of building relationships with people, within CPC, but then also with other faith groups, with people, other Christians, with people of other faiths, especially through Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. Also partnering with other organizations like the Community Immigration Law Center and other groups. So those relationships have been some of the most rewarding parts of this work, and within our group too. And then action, lots of different kinds of actions, things like writing letters to people in detention, going to protests, getting out and just speaking publicly, protesting, reaching out to people. So that's kind of the overarching umbrella. And then Mary and I are going to take turns kind of I'm going to start off talking about the immigration justice focus, and then she's going to talk about the other areas of focus. So this is one of our main areas, one of the things we've settled on, which is immigration justice. And the motivation there, of course, is that we're called to welcome the stranger. Throughout the Bible, there are so many different places where we're called to welcome the stranger. And of course, that's not what's happening. We're thinking about immigrants coming to our country as strangers. So we've done a lot of different things over the years. This is something that we've been focusing on from the beginning. So we've done, I mentioned letter writing to people in detention. That's the photo in the background is a photo of these letters. So we did these in person first. This was a collaboration with the Community Immigration Law Center, who had the idea and helped us get going and connected us with a detention center and lawyers who visit people in a detention center at the border. So we did these in person. We normally have like a 15-20-minute program at the beginning where we learn about some aspect of immigration, and then we just write letters. It's just making a human connection. These people stuck in this just awful situation, just letting them know we're thinking about them, we haven't forgotten them, we value them, we want them in our country, in this country. We've done those, we moved them online during the pandemic. It's been a while since we've had one, but we've started talking about getting that going again, because it's a surprisingly powerful experience to do it. We've done several book studies on immigration issues, we share updates on immigration issues through our Refuge email list. We have been doing them in kind of regular immigration spotlights in the church email, which has shifted format lately. So we haven't been doing those lately. We try to support the Community Immigration Law Center where we can. And then I've also been supporting refugee resettlement in Madison, which has happened partly through, Mary in particular, connecting people to Open Doors for Refugees, which is a wonderful local organization that works to welcome refugees in the community. Mary in particular was also very involved in helping CPC setting up the program to support a refugee family. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Mary to talk about our next focus area.
Okay, so I want to talk about, is this working? Okay, so I want to talk about voter justice. Why we're doing that, because we're called to do justice for the poor and the oppressed, and it feels like the way voting legislation is going now, it is trying to exclude certain people groups, and that's the main thing that we're concerned about and are fighting against. And one of the things that we do related to that, we work with other groups, for like the League of Women Voters, for example, to do voter registration events. We show up to events. I mean, this is a picture here of a few years ago where it's actually an immigration-related event, but that we, just showing that we show up to events and invite people to come to them as well. We had prayer gatherings around the elections when we were concerned about the outcomes of the election. We all got together and prayed about that. We track legislation and provide updates to people and say, okay, this legislation is coming up here. Perhaps you want to tell your congressperson what you think about that. And then we've done some book studies on democracy issues. Like one of the first ones we started with was that Timothy Snyder book, 20 Lessons for the 20th Century, which is really eye-opening as far as we can't assume that our democracy is always going to be with us. It's not necessarily a constant, and it's something that we have to work to maintain. So that's some of the things that we do. And then we ended up evolving into the self-care part for a couple reasons. We were noticing that we were getting burned out. We knew we needed to be in this for the long haul. And we're trying to figure out, how do we do that? You can't base what you're doing on anger or you're going to burn out, so it needs to be grounded in love. And around the same time, Sarah Lubbers and Juanita Ryan joined, who are very gifted in those kind of things. So it was kind of a great thing to have that happening at the same time, where there was a need and God met it through these two people coming in that had the background in that. So the reason why we do that is we're called to rest, we're called to take care of our own bodies. We're called to do things in love. So the way that we've done that is having events on doing justice from your spiritual core was one of them. We did one on secondary or vicarious trauma. They've been having tips in the church email on self-care ideas like meditation and things like that. And we've also had prayer gatherings around elections and things where there was traumatic events going on. We sensed the need that people wanted to pray about it together. So we met together and did that. And then this is sort of a related thing to the immigration stuff. But what ended up happening is we connected to Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. There's a lot of different people from different faiths there. Initially, I wanted to be involved in those groups and getting to know those people of other faiths, because in 2016 and 2017, there was talk about having a registry for people that were from Islamic faith. And it's like we wanted to befriend these people that in case something happened where they were feeling traumatized or whatever, they would have somebody to turn to, or they would have people that they could trust. That's how it started, but then it just turned it into these great friendships and that enriched my life in a really great way. So what we do every year is we have an Interfaith Ramadan Iftar, which several people have participated in. That's going to be on April 1st this year, if you're interested in that. We'll be sending out more information on that later, like in the church emails. And then a new thing that we're coming up with is, what is it called? We're calling it Interfaith Intersections. So it's like topic-based. We get a group of people together, we invite people from the Wisconsin Faith Voices Interfaith group, and we have speakers from different faith groups to talk about different subjects. This will be our first time on March 9th that we'll be trying that out. It's going to be at the Quaker Meeting House over by Trader Joe's, and we're really looking forward to that. Actually, Phil's been involved in that too, with putting that together, and we're really looking forward to that. And like I said before, just being involved with that group has just been great to develop some friendships with people that I wouldn't have interacted with otherwise, and that I get to talk about things that are important to me. They're important to them too. So I just really enjoyed that. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention was we have an email list, and you can sign up for it over there. A lot of people are already on it, but it's just informational. So that's where you'd get the thing like, okay, there's this bill coming up. Here's this link you can click on to find out more about it. Here's your contact information for your representatives or whatever, that kind of stuff. And you can decide whether or not you want to be involved in it or ask questions or whatever. So, and there's our contact information. If you also want that, we've got those handouts that we handed out last week that had the contact information for us and then for all the other groups too. So I think that's it. So Martha is next to talk about racial justice.
So the racial justice team has been another group, much like Refuge, that's been operating for a number of years at CPC. Initially was around, it really supported a local nonprofit called Moses, and Moses used to meet here at the church, and Moses is focused on criminal justice reform issues. And then out of that, and then along with the events around the killing of George Floyd, we began to meet together as a leadership team. So the basic foundation, you're going to hear Micah 6 a lot today, I think. Micah 6:8 about doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with our God. Another, again, just shows kind of where we're based, the scriptural basis for the work that we're doing. We want to live into Micah 6:8. And the idea is engaging on a journey of praying about, learning about, and acting on racial injustice in the United States and Madison. And our goal is really to try to become better and more helpful anti-racist allies to those in the Black community. And we learn from, we follow the lead, and come alongside people and organizations of color. So again, we're working to become helpful anti-racist allies, and then embed these principles and this idea into the life of the church. I think our leadership team does a really great job on Sunday mornings to keep these issues front and center. And we want to keep embedding that into the life of the church, whether it's through the youth groups or other educational type activities. So some of the ways that we've carried out these principles behind learning and acting in particular, again, some of these things are these kind of activities or some of the things that Refuge also does. We've had book discussions. We've done a number of book discussions through the years. Just Mercy is one of the books. Cast is another one. We hope to restart that, and we'll talk about that in a little minute, but we used to meet in the summertime out in the park behind the church, which makes a great setting, and we've actually attracted some people from outside the church to come and join us in those. We've been a big proponent of the Justified Anger's Black History for a New Day course, which has become a course they give now twice a year. We really try to encourage people at CPC to attend. We think about 40 people from the church. I'd be curious, how many people in the room tonight have taken, look at this, fantastic. So if anybody hasn't taken it, wants to know about it, talk to any of the people that just raised their hand, because I think you'll hear very positive things. And I'll get back to that about what our plans are for this year with that. There's been a number of Faith Cafe series in the area, and then Be the Bridge for Youth is another activity that's gone on to help us in this learning area. I've spoken about Moses, sort of in the action area. Many of us participated in one or more protests over the last few years, particularly around unjust murder, killing of unarmed black people, particularly by police officers. One of our sort of I refer to it sort of as a sister organization, but another organization we have ties with is Own It, and Own It works to empower communities of color towards home ownership, because that's one of the main ways to build wealth. And home ownership has been denied for so long. particularly to people of color throughout our nation's history. So this is a way to try to, and that's how most generational wealth is passed, how much generational wealth is gathered and then passed on. And so the Own It works towards education. They have a home down payment fund that allows people to actually make those important down payments. Own It is part of the CPC's annual budget, and many members donate on their own. And then Grace Tuatha, who helped start the group, is now on their board, and my husband Rich is a temporary staff person who's helping a new director they just recently hired. So we're very pleased to be a part of partnering with the Own It group. The team helped respond to a call that was made after the George Floyd protest march, where a question was raised about helping a local church pay down their mortgage. So we were not the only church that contributed. Many local churches did the same thing, but we were very proud and pleased to be a part of that effort, and Mountain Zion was able to pay off their mortgage at that. We also responded to a call from Jessica, which I think was sort of unique in that she had a conversation with local judge Everett Mitchell that indicated that as you point to the walls in the courtroom where he works, and many of the young people that come through his courtroom are black and brown, and he said, I would love to see them have themselves reflected in the walls here. So he commissioned a portrait of a black justice, which we then helped defray some of the cost of that as well. So like being a part of that as well. And then many of us are involved in various ways of just individual acts of ways that we feel led to or important to engage in this area. So kind of just a highlight of some of the things that are up next for this team. Coming up very quickly, at the end of this month, a group of 11 of us are going to be traveling down to Montgomery and Selma, Alabama on an exploratory trip. Two members who now live in Florida, many people know Karen and Barb, did this trip on their own and then brought back this idea to the church at large or to the justice team to say, we really think this is an important way to continue on with the learning and to really see, and in the parlance of a book that's not that old, the way the story is told. How are we telling the story of the civil rights movement and the history in our country? So a group of us are traveling down there to learn on our own, but also the idea is that we will be planning similar trips in the future that would be open to the people in the congregation. Also, I've been approached by a friend of mine that goes to Covenant Presbyterian Church to do a joint book study between the two churches and it's a book called What Kind of Christianity? And it focuses on the history of the Presbyterian Church, the Presbyterian Church's history in connection with slavery and racism, and how it was not anti-racist for many, many years. And it's a very compelling read, and I think it's very important for us as a denomination to sort of face this history and learn about it and learn from it. We don't have a specific plan yet. It would probably be much like I said, we probably gather for Christ Pres, would be probably on a Saturday morning, sometime in the spring, and then a similar group would be gathering at Covenant as well. And then kind of going back to the Justified Anger course, again, they've just started the latest cohort. The spring cohort started actually last Monday, but there will be another cohort in the fall. And our efforts will be looking to offer a facilitated group for people in CPC. So anybody would have the option to individually attend this class. But we are hoping, we did this last year, and it was, I think, very, very meaningful to gather with people in a faith community, and then you watch the lectures online, and then you gather in a discussion group to talk through the issues that are raised in that particular discussion. Normally the class is offered on Monday nights, but we're looking to maybe offer it on a Wednesday, having our own dedicated discussion group gives us that flexibility. thanks to the way that Justified Anger has been working to help this, really push out this course and make it so it's available to more people in more places. It's a 9-week course, 2 hours a week, and there is financial assistance available from the church, and we'll give more details out as the time gets closer to that. So with that, I will pass the mic. Oh, here's the contact information. We'd love to have you join us. Myself, Debbie Kunkel's in the back. Debbie, most of you know Debbie, but feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And with that, I will pass this on.
And do I just do that? There we go. Good evening. My name is Grace Hassler, and I'm the co-chair of the new kid on the block called Creation Care Team. And Peter Blanchard and I co-chair this very new committee. And just briefly, you can find us on the CPC website. If you go to the side menu at the top, the bars at the top, and then you go to About, and then you go to Act, and you'll see our mission statement and our values and principles. The other members of the committee are Juanita Ryan, Austin Long, Lee Langford, and Peter and myself. And actually, I think last week there were some questions about, can you join a committee? And yes, you can join a committee, and we would love to have you in our leadership. So watch for a couple of things coming up as we try to weave ourselves into the life of the church. One would be to look for an upcoming newsletter. We do have a group called Creation Google something. Anyway, Google group, which you can put your name on our sign-up list and be a part of that. We also are very much aware of the connection between immigration and refugees and the environmental justice issues, and so we see ourselves as very much a part of the justice efforts in our church. The other highlight of this coming year and the next few years will be the Inflation Reduction Act, which will help us as a church facility address and find ourselves addressing environmental changes that might need to be made in our church facility, and that for which we have available resources in the future. So we might even just have a subcommittee that looks at our facility issues. So I'd like to introduce you to Austin Lang. Austin Lang works at McKenzie County Park, has an environmental education background, and she teaches children at this park in what? Poynette, Wisconsin. McKenzie Center. Is that what I said? Anyway. And Lee Langford recently received or got a master's degree in?
Master of Science, Environmental Conservation.
And they're going to tell you a little bit about what they're passionate about and what they see as creation care at CPC.
Thanks. Okay. Turn. Okay, sorry. So just clip on. Okay. All right. Thank you for that introduction, Grace. So yes, we are the new kids on the block, but so excited to be here. And so our mission is, we believe that caring well for creation and caring for each other, especially for those most harmed by climate change, is a central part of living out faith in response to God's call to care for the earth and to love our neighbor. We will offer opportunities to learn, pray, and act on behalf of our earth and its people. So I really see what we do is operating within that intersection, that ripe intersection, which is the environment and justice. And that's why I was called to be a part of that. So it has been a journey, and so it just, okay. So, we just changed the slide, great, okay, all right. Oh, okay, so that was a slide. Okay, great. Thank you. And so our values, what centers our work and our conversations, is grounded in God's love for the created world. We work in loving community with those at CPC as well as others in our community to address climate issues and environmental risks. We seek the Spirit's guidance in that. We learn from and work for justice for those most impacted by environmental hazards. And we encourage and embrace individual, community, systemic changes that address climate change and other environmental impacts. And we also celebrate the wonder and beauty of this world, of creation, even as we grieve the losses that are brought on by environmental crises. So Angie had presented about climate and what was happening a couple of weekends ago, and there were several quotes in there that just really grabbed my heart and just squeezed. It's so helpful to just be mindful of what's some of these benchmarks that scientists, the science community are anticipating, having on the horizon to kind of think of how that might affect our community and what work needs to be done. So, Austin, sorry, go ahead.
So again, my name is Austin. What drew me to this committee really stemmed from the work that I do in bringing kids out into nature, and the work that I'm most drawn to in this is really finding ways to connect people with creation and see ourselves as part of this, as siblings to the natural world that we're here in. So I am really excited about what we're going to do in this committee, in that we really have an opportunity to start bringing folks from the church out and building connections and seeing how the Bible and our theology is really calling us towards loving the earth and being part of the earth and building these connections. So I'll go on to the next one. So some of the things that we've worked on this year are we looked at how the church building is using energy with that energy audit. We've been really interested in the Interfaith Power and Light work, which is an organization that is national, but also operates on state level. So there's a Wisconsin chapter, and so we're really excited to see where those relationships will go in, I think it was October?
Probably.
Yeah, we screened the film The Ants and the Grasshopper, which was about farmers, I don't remember where. Malawi.
Basically live simply so others can simply live.
It was a really amazing film, and showed about how like farms in, I think there were a lot of Wisconsin farms, but American farms, and how resource use is like vastly different in these two places. And then we did have Angela talk about climate change, and we have been really interested in finding ways to bring the congregation out in either connecting with nature or learning about different ways that the church is getting more working on justice and really trying to find ways that we as a community can fight against climate change. Because it's not something that one person's actions can really impact as much as we can do together. And then another thing that we did was the art show down the sanctuary hallway. I believe it's still up. It is. Yeah, so if you have some time tonight, you can take a walk down that hallway and see some creation-themed art. And we are a really young committee, so we are really looking for feedback, involvement, guidance. We want to know how we can bring more people in to our mission and see how we can create this of what y'all want it to be. Would you like to share some of your dreams for the committee?
I'd like to see a little bit more planting going on, actually getting out there in the dirt, getting my hands dirty. So things like that I think are really meaningful, really powerful. And then other than planting, like I'm passionate about hummingbirds, our pollinators, are animals that are specialists that just need nectar. So like planting native plants that would help with those pollinators and things like that.
Yeah. I think what I would really love to see is for us to kind of put the seasons of the earth and the way that Scripture calls us to really live in the world and be outside, have that become more a part of our life together in community here, and for us to really invite people just to be outdoors and see ways that I think we talk a lot about ways that people are harming the earth, but also see how we can live in community with the earth. So if you are interested in talking more with us about this program, like Grace said, we would love to have you on the committee if you're interested in that side of work. I think we'll also be really finding ways to get people involved in the coming year too. We've just started planning out what we want to be, and so as we grow, we really want to bring more people into this goal.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Up next, we're going to have a video with Carter, and I just realized I'm not quite sure how to play it.
If you move your finger, it should show.
Hey everybody, my name is Carter. I'm the Director of Family Ministries here. You might know me, you might not, but I just want to say thanks for the invitation to talk to you a little bit about what we do with justice stuff at Youth Ministry here at CPC. First of all, I am in the youth room. Yes, that is a penguin behind me. His name is Gerald. That's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, I just want to take a minute and just tell you a little bit about what we do here at CPC Youth Ministry with regards to justice. And I want to do that by trying to tell you a little bit about my story. As I know is the case with a lot of people, my justice story has been one of transformation and awakening over a long period of time. And for me, it's something that's always ongoing. For me, it started from a theological perspective. I grew up in a conservative tradition, and most of my initial kind of theological and spiritual formation took place in a Bible college, where I was kind of force-fed theology that I just accepted without knowing any better. Theology that I would later come to understand is very harmful, fundamentalist, and wholly unbiblical or Christ-like. And a lot of this change of perspective happened later when I was in seminary. Now, I still went to a seminary that was a little bit conservative, but it did offer me the chance to read theological perspectives that really, really rocked me. It was at seminary where I first read James Cone and discovered liberation theology. I was first exposed to queer theology, which really helped shape my perspective on becoming LGBTQ affirming. And it was at seminary that I realized that biblical justice had a lot to do with lifting people up as opposed to kind of deliberating retribution and punishing them. That's it kind of reshaped my opinion of what justice was. And that's the thing that we try to hit on a lot at youth group. Biblical justice is redemptive, not punitive. We talk a lot about restoration versus retribution in a variety of ways. One way that we're going to be doing relatively soon, this month we're doing a series called Jesus at the Movies, where we look at popular movies, we try to pull out biblical themes and see how we can engage in movies and art in a new way and kind of see Jesus throughout all of it. And in that series, in a few weeks, we're going to talk about the 2018 Marvel movie, Black Panther, which I'm a huge Marvel fan, so this is just like great for me. But the reason we're talking about that is because the central argument of the movie is, should we use our gifts and our talents and our privileges to end injustices and restore both the oppressed people and the oppressors? That last part, and the oppressors, is key. Because the argument in the film is, should we do that, or should we use what we have in order to free the oppressed, but also destroy the oppressors? That's kind of the core argument of the film. So we're going to spend a week talking about that, seeing what Scripture has to say, and how do we see this lived out in the life of Jesus, and what does that mean for us, of course. But, as we know, it's not enough to just sit around and talk about it. We have to live this out. So this is why we do regular service days with our youth ministry, where we work with local organizations like Luke House or St. Vincent de Paul Food Pantry, and while we're going on a mission trip to Memphis, Tennessee this summer. So we can not only just get out of our bubbles and see inequity in person and be the hands and feet of Christ to people who need it physically, but also so we can bring those experiences back home, so we can examine our internal biases, our inherent biases, and we can really start to work to identify the structural and systemic reasons that things like poverty, racism, classism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, fill in the blank, why all these things exist. What are the structures that allow that, and what can we do about it? So that's a super brief and very fast way to look at this and what we're doing in youth ministry. It's obviously an ongoing process, and if you'd like to learn more about this, or just about youth ministry in general, I want to invite you to partner with us. Come talk to me. We'll find a way to get you involved in whatever way that you think is good. Thanks again so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Carter.
Hey everybody, my name is Carter.
Just hear it again. Encore. So now we're going to do our little bit of discussion time, break off into our groups. Before we do that, and we're going to have you guys get up and move in just a minute, but we do want to just set up some basic discussion guidelines, because sometimes this work, when you talk about justice, this is going to be some internal work and then sharing amongst ourselves. But first of all, first and foremost, confidentiality. Please, what is said here stays here. And that just helps set up a trustful place for people to be able to share openly. We want to be time efficient. I mean, we're not going to give you much time, so we're gonna, you need to be time efficient. But and at the same time, please try to give everybody a chance to share if they choose. We ask for everyone to be respectful of each other and views that are expressed. We are trying to create a safe place. We don't want to get off into sidetracks. This is not a place really for debate at this time, and politics, although they might have a place, they're not our focus. And these are barred from justified anger. And these are the guidelines that are used in the discussion groups around the history course, and I think they're excellent for times like this. So we're going to give a little bit of an exercise. Did people get pieces of paper, or is it on? Yeah, so the handout. So the back of the handout is these three concentric circles. What do we call them? The overlapping circles, intersecting. So there's kind of just basically the first one, what brings you joy. This is sort of how this is a method, just one of many to help you maybe think if you're not quite sure where your justice actions may lie. This is kind of a way to explore that, or double check the ones that you've been, things that you've been working on. So what brings you joy? What are sources of satisfaction and delight? What needs work? What work needs to be done in your personal life, in our church congregation, in the wider world? And then what can you influence? Where are your skills and sources and networks at work? And so we will give you a couple minutes to ponder these, and then we're going to come together for the discussion questions. There we go. So basically, what are your 3 circles? What are your justice actions in your life at CPC or the wider world? How might your justice actions intersect with which work is happening at CPC? And then much like many of us in talking about our respective groups, we all want to hear feedback. Is there anything that you would love to see in a particular area this church get involved in? What work? Because we really want to hear feedback. That's what's really, it's wonderful, and yet kind of the challenge of this work we're doing. We definitely have overlaps for these 3 groups. So we're not exclusive, and we're not trying to be exclusive, and yet, and I love that kind of story where we're here to support these other organizations like the Immigration Law Center and Own It, et cetera. And that's I think, if the group doesn't mind, I would summarize real quickly one of the things I heard in the racial justice group was talking about there's no need to recreate work. There's a lot of good work that's already happening. So are there places where we could continue to come alongside a particular organization? We started with Moses. We've got a relationship with Own It. Where does that, where maybe that's a direction to go, and we don't have to recreate a wheel or try to come up with something new and different. Well, again, a lot of good energy tonight. Thanks to each and every one of you for coming. Just a quick reminder, we'd love to have you back next week. It's the last of our 3 weeks on this justice topic. Doing justice grounded in love is the topic. Juanita and Sarah Lubbers will be our hosts for the evening and speakers for the evening.